North.
I got 6 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. All members are present. One student, do we still have just one? We just have one student.
Fingers crossed, we'll have one at the next meeting.
Okay.
Don't quote me though.
Otherwise, everybody's here. Additions to the agenda, we had one.
Correct.
You all got a hold of that one?
Yep.
Okay, so is there approval of the agenda with the addition?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Bruce makes a motion, Cheryl seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Any public comment? None that I'm aware of. We go to the consent agenda. Janelle, would you like to lead us through that?
Sure can. Actually, I'm gonna first see if Cheryl would like to walk through the bills and then we'll talk through personnel.
I was able to look at the bills today and nothing really jumped out at me. It's all just business as usual.
Sounds good. Personnel, we've had some coaching changes, and so you'll see some hires for coaching for winter season. We do have some needs for spring coaches still, so if anybody is interested in coaching, check out the website to look for spring postings here soon. And then we have a couple of leave of absence and some resignations for the personnel items. Donations today, I'll call those out. I'll make sure you click on the tab, click on the November 26th tab. So you are going to notice that our Donors Choose donations are going to start coming to the board more consistently and regularly. Donors Choose is an organization that really does make it pretty easy for teachers to write, to request funding for programs or specific things for their classrooms. And so then the district office gets a recognition of who's contributed to that item and then where it went. So you'll see first grade received, it was a lakeshore drawing and writing journal, a set of 10 by 7. So must be 70 different writing journals. So that was for our first graders. So just if you see those coming, those are projects that our teachers have written, have put together and have requested some funding from Donors Choose, and then various people can donate to that organization. You'll also notice we have our medal from Lewis Industries. That always is a great resource for our students because then they don't have to buy the medal when they're welding and they're learning how to do the different projects. And so we appreciate our relationship with Lewis Industries and those donations that they make for us on a regular basis. You'll also see that we have we have a donation for families in need. So we've had an Egg Country Farm Credit Services where it's $300 to each school. This time of year, a lot of times people are looking for ways to support youth and families. And so that's a donation that came in. And then we've got a youth baseball and a band and choir from Paynesville, Chevrolet, and Valley Industries. So I know it takes a little bit of time to look at those, but I'm grateful for the generosity of our community. They really could donate to many places, and so we're grateful that they choose the school. So, and with that, I would stand for any questions about the consent agenda. Otherwise,
Are there any questions? Someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Bruce, Thomas.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it passes. Okay, we go to communication items, beginning with the superintendent's report.
not an extensive amount to report today. We've covered some big items over the last couple of work sessions, but the biggest thing I want to just call out is that our next 2 months we have inconsistent schedules for board meetings. So December, we only have one, so it'll be December 10th. And that's a kind of a work business altogether because we get too close to the holidays if we have those 2 sessions. And then as we look into January, we will have our change in board members. And so in December, we'll say farewell to Rick and we'll welcome Jacob in January. But just take a look at calendars that on either January 6th or January 7th, we need to have our first meeting, and then we'll have our organizational meeting and our work session. The following week is the School Board Association, so that's why we've kind of tried to avoid that week, which would have been typically our second Tuesday, which is kind of the time frame we stick with. So just a reminder as to why these schedules get a little bit weird in December and January. And then with that, I will go over to just the financial reports, the revenues and expenditures. Again, the tabs are updated. So if we kind of take a look at October 31st. So you will notice that in November after, or when we have the audit approval, these will be updated to say the audited revenues and the audited expenditures. But just know that these are updated. And if you take a look over at the green column again, you can see where we're at year over year and current versus prior year in relation to where the budget is. So, I should probably share that. Ryan, do you have any? You probably have no idea what I'm casting right now. So, taking if there are any questions, there's nothing that stood out when I looked at the bills or at the tracking over the last couple of months. But the revenues are there and your expenditures are consistent as well. Taking a look at your October tab. Okay. That's what I have for my administrative report.
Okay, some organizational reports. Policy committee has met, and we will make our second report next in the agenda. You're down different. So take care of that. West Central Ed.
Yes, they did meet. I was unable to attend. I was at another meeting.
Yep.
Filled in for me. So.
West Central Ed, they had their audit presented as well. They have a clean audit, which is positive. They also had some policy to review, some personnel matters, but pretty routine business function. We are looking at within the West Central Ed structure. There is going to be at least 2, maybe 3 new board members. So that'll be and I know this organizational meeting will take place in January as well, but they're hoping to have their organizational meeting on Monday, January 13th. So whoever is from this board would plan to be part of that West Central Ed board too. So that's coming up in January.
Okay. District-wide staff development.
We met a couple weeks ago almost. Really just kind of looking over December 3rd, late start, and January 20th, the day off. That was supposed to be the Academy Day in Corey that was attended well last year, if I recall. Unfortunately, it sounds like they've had to cancel that for the next couple of years to be determined on some of those reasons. So I know that was kind of a bummer to the group, but.
Yep. And actually, part of why the attendees have opted not to use the Academy Day function is because they have such a heavy load with their letters training. And for us, we're really sitting in a good position. And I know I've said that 100 times, but I'll say it 101. It just is really, our district is in a good position from the letters perspective. And so they needed those days. So we had to come up with plan B.
Yep. So that's what really is the main plan. And I know there's much questions that are going to go out to staff to kind of figure out what they're looking for development wise. And then I think we're meeting again here. Is it middle of December-ish? End of December sometime? 11th. Yeah, I know I can't be there, so I think Rachel's gonna sub in for me on that meeting. Yep. But to kind of finalize some of those plans for the January 20th day off there. So.
Okay, District Advisory Committee.
Yes, we did meet. We had a very good meeting. Janelle had gone over the findings, or at least the information that's been provided through the fast bridge, some more with what we pull out of the Minnesota standards, and showed the folks really where the school is at based off the fast bridge data, the importance of using fast bridge. We do use both, but the importance of using that fast bridge, and how both the elementary and secondary schools are using that to increase as far as I guess that the education of our children based off of that, or students based off of that. So I did really hear a lot from community members. There were some things that had been brought up, so those are being addressed or at least looked into. But again, a very successful meeting, and we will have another one in the springtime. And yeah, I think this is a great committee that's been put together. pulling the folks together that we had, Janelle has laid out to pull together. It'll definitely help with our strategic plan as far as moving forward.
I thought it was great. We had a great meeting when we talked about the data these people are all collecting. And to have the Fast Bridge with more current data of what's going on ahead of it, with the MCA's kind of maybe a little more in the background. When that Fast Bridge is working, I feel that it's tracking well enough. We're gonna have some up curves and that MCA is gonna fall right into place. It just may take some time, but it's awesome. Very, very interesting.
And the other thing that came out as far as the MCA data, just a strong, recommendation to the parents, as far as their students that do take those, not to opt out of it. It is data that we do need to take a look at. It's a reflection of our school, and the unfortunate thing with parents that allow their students to opt out, it really skews the data. They are an outlier, but they aren't thrown out, so they are counted as a failure within our school. So of looking at that reading, the mathematics side of it, our language arts portion of it, it does really hurt. So,
And that was something that we talked about is how we can communicate so that parents can be they can make an educated decision, because every family has to make the decision that's right for them. But in the conversation, there was a lot of I didn't know that if we don't take it, it counts as a does not pass. So it was just a good educational discussion.
And most of the people that were there representing the public had no idea of that. And they just wanted to know how they would have access to the data so they could kind of watch it too. And so this administration team is working on how we have it more readily available. So if we have somebody truly looking at our district, not only will they have MCAs to look at, but they can go in and figure out really what we're doing more on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It was a great meeting.
and that was strong encouragement from the community side, with the representatives that they had, just wanting to be involved and see where the grades are at, and how they are progressing, to want to see that data and have an understanding of that data. That was very encouraging.
Okay.
And then
Then we got continuing educations up there now.
Yeah, we met yesterday. It sounds like everything's on track. So
And we have not student representatives, we have a representative. Next meeting, maybe we'll have a
Maybe. I don't like doing all this. Okay, so first off, for sports, there's obviously a girls' basketball home game. I think it's against Osakis. And then there's both boys and girls hockey tonight. And then there's a big wrestling tournament tomorrow at Melrose. National Honor Society is currently going around to organizations and helping to fundraise for the early childhood program. So that is a big project that we're doing. We're also going to elementary school and just helping kids do fun things, just kind of making them excited to go to school. SAD is also going to elementary school a lot to help with fun little activities like card games, crafts. SAD also recently painted, I believe, the new counselor's office. They came in on a day off and completely revamped that room and made it super fun and pretty. Student council is starting to kick off our blood drive, which is amazing for first-time donors so that they can have a nice, comfortable space to give blood for the first time. Community members are also encouraged to help donate there too as well. That's it.
Thank you. Okay. So no old business, we move into new business with our fiscal year 24 audit report.
Right.
Here we go.
So I will turn it over to Ryan and let him, are you going to share your screen, or would you like me to, you're going to take care of it?
Yep, I'll share my screen, I think. I think that works best.
Great, thank you.
All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'm going to walk us through the results of the FY24 audit. And I have a PowerPoint presentation here as in the past, just to kind of help summarize things and walk through some of the high points. Feel free to interrupt me at any point along the way, and we can go through any questions as they come up. All right, so moving into the first slide of the presentation here, I always like to kind of start out with a little bit of a reminder. What exactly is it we do during the audit each year? What is the purpose of the audit? So just a quick reminder, an audit essentially consists of us obtaining your financial records from throughout the past year, so FY24, and performing a number of procedures over this information. So these procedures consist of things such as inquiries with your accounting staff, people inside the district, various analytics where we maybe compare revenues and expenses to the budget or to prior year trends or industry trends, and then lots of detailed testing and sampling procedures where we look at the supporting documentation for the individual transactions in your accounting system. So looking at invoices and bank statements and reports from the state, property tax reports, et cetera, all for the purpose of verifying that activity in your accounting system, because that's what comes together and makes up the information that's in your full financial statements. And then we're able to express an opinion on whether or not we feel that those financial statements are accurate. And the opinion that we've given you this year is what's called an unmodified opinion. So that is the clean opinion that you're always trying to achieve. So in a nutshell, you got the clean opinion. The next slide here walks through some of the other kind of required communications. Basically, if we had any problems during the audit, or if we saw unusual activity or had difficulty working with anybody at the school, or just anything at all out of the ordinary, this is where we would tell you about it. But I'm happy to say that things went smoothly. Everything progressed along the way that we would expect, and I really have nothing out of the ordinary to report to you here. As part of the audit, we also look at your internal controls. So that's kind of like the processes and procedures that are behind the numbers. So how do you go about paying your bills and making sure they're approved? And how do you where do you keep your investments, and how do you go about managing that activity? And how do you segregate duties to the extent possible? That sort of thing. And then we always have a few items to relate or to communicate related to those areas. So the first one here, I always like to touch on audit adjustments, because a lot of the districts we work with, we actually do post a lot of adjustments during the audit. So what that means is that during the course of the audit, if we find a problem with one of the numbers, usually just an error of some sort, we help fix it. We record adjustments in order to fix it and get those numbers to where they need to be so that we can still give you that clean opinion. Well, at your district, we actually didn't really have any significant audit adjustments. So that's a good sign that the information that you're getting throughout the year, those financial reports, is probably quite accurate. So that's good to see. The two other items on here, same items I've reported in the past. The first one is that overall there is a bit of a lack of segregation of duties in your district with the accounting functions. Just from the standpoint of you only have so many people that are involved with the accounting process. And there's a couple people that really have access to just about every piece of the accounting system. So just something to be aware of and implement oversight wherever you can. And then we also do prepare the financial statements on behalf of the district, which whenever there's an outside party doing that, there's theoretically a heightened risk that there could be a missing disclosure of some sort, something along those lines. Next page here, the state also gives us checklists related to each one of these areas where we have to review for your compliance with Minnesota statutes. Where do you keep your cash and investments, any transactions with conflicts of interest, so on and so forth. We didn't have any issues, no findings this year. Everything we looked at looked like it was good. All right, with that, we'll move into the numbers. So before I get into the numbers, I always like to look at enrollment trends, since that has such a strong correlation to your funding. And you can see that you've held pretty steady in recent years. And then in FY24, you actually have a little bit of an increase here. You're up about 21 students overall from FY23 to FY24. And as I was prepping for this presentation, I noticed that actually the increase was almost entirely within the pre-K through 6 category, which is probably a really good sign for the future. Looks like that's the highest that's been at over the past 5 years here on the graph. And with that, we'll move into the general fund, take a look at the activity in the general fund from just kind of a really high level here. We have revenues in the blue, expenditures in the red, and then your fund balance at the end of each year over the course of the past 5 years, and then also the 2024 budget on the right-hand side. So just from a really high level look here, you can see that revenues were very close to budget, came in over budget around $171,000 for the year. And expenditures were even closer to budget and were actually under budget by about $26,000, which is pretty much right on the nose when you're talking about a budget of about $2.2 million. So very, very close. So overall, your final budget called for an increase of about $1.4 million, and your actual increase was about 1.6. The next couple pages take those same revenues and expenditures from that last slide, and here we break out the revenues into a few smaller categories, and then the next slide has the same layout but for expenditures. You can see the vast majority of your revenues in the general fund do come from state sources, and you can see you were very close to budget. You did have a bit of a bump from what you had in 2023, mostly due to that increased enrollment, then also some additional costs for special ed, which kind of drive the funding there. So between the two, most of what's driving your increase in state funding. The only other item to really point out here is that your federal funding, of course, did drop off quite a bit from FY23, just as some of that COVID-related funding finally tapered off. Next page, same layout here, but for expenditures. Of course, regular instruction being the category where you have the largest amount of expenditures. Very close to budget here overall, though. Areas where you change would be special ed, as I mentioned, increased a little bit compared to the prior year, which drove that additional state funding. And other than that, just not a whole lot to point out here. Things were pretty consistent with last year and very close to the budget. Okay, so the next slide here takes a look at your fund balance at the end of each year over the past 5 years. And it breaks out that fund balance into the different categories: restricted, committed, assigned, et cetera. So as a reminder, fund balance, it's essentially your assets minus your liabilities on a very short-term basis. We're not including long-term debt and capital assets and all that stuff. It's more of a short-term look of your assets minus your liabilities. And with that increase in fund balance for the year, you can see you did have a bit of a jump here, a pretty substantial jump. But it's not all unassigned. You know, unassigned is the portion that's free for your day-to-day use. But you can see you also had increases in the restricted, the red category. I think a good chunk of this, about $1 million, is for long-term facilities maintenance, is what it's restricted for. Then also some increases in your assigned and committed balances there as well. And then one last slide on the general fund, just to hammer it home a little more. Here we have the unassigned portion of your fund balance as a percentage of your annual budgeted expenditures. So you actually have a policy in place to have this ratio be at least 12.5% of the 12.5% of the annual budget. And you can see you did jump a bit this year, and you're up to about 22.7%. So you're well in excess of your minimum.
Say, Ryan, because we had those referendums that passed, we're at a time where we have a little more of that revenue. So the curve from 20 to 23 to 2024 that's showing up in all the other graphs is because we have that extra money in there, I'm assuming. And if we go to the curve between 2020 and 2022, that was our downward trend before we got it passed. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that I think you probably are reading that right. That was an operational referendum.
No?
Yes, in 22. Mhm.
Yep, and then it has to rise, it'll just keep on rising, but then it'll peak, and then we get on that downward trend again.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds accurate to me. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors at play as far as, what you're budgeting for and what you've got coming down the pipe, but that sounds accurate to me. Okay. Moving on to the next area here. We're going to take a quick look at just your remaining funds. So starting out with debt service and building construction. So just really big picture, debt service, you've got your property tax revenue coming in here and a little bit of state aid, and then your expenses for debt principal and interest payments. Overall, slight decrease in fund balance here, but pretty typical activity. And building construction fund really didn't have much for activity this year. Just some interest earnings and a couple costs run through here, but you have residual cash left here of about $337,000 at the end of the year. And the next slide just shows the cash in both of those funds over the past 5 years. You can see that both of them held pretty steady from FY23 to the end of FY24. And last two funds here to take a look at, we have your food service fund and your community service fund. Food service revenues here were up about $195,000 overall, but the state funding here was up about $400,000 in comparison to the prior year as a result of the additional state funding for free student meals. So with that, you also did have an increase in your food expenses. So expenditures here were up about $116,000 compared to the prior year. So you had an overall increase of about $68,000 in that fund balance. And community service activity here was very, very consistent with prior years. Nothing unusual stood out there. And
if we had the free lunches, why would our expenditures be up then? I could understand that we got more money from the state because, of course, the taxpayer is paying for free lunch. But
if I had to guess, I would guess you had increased student participation. There were maybe we've kind of seen that at other schools. There's kids that in the past were maybe bringing their own lunch, and now that it's free, the parents are saying, "Well, go eat at school." So it's a thought.
yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Then the next slide here just shows the cash in both of those funds over the past 5 years. You can see community service has been on a pretty steady upward trend, and food service jumped about $37,000 this past year. Okay, so that does it for all the individual funds. The next couple slides, we take a look at everything for the entire district wrapped together. And we also throw in some of those non-current items. So this is putting things on the full accrual basis of accounting where we have capital assets, so your buildings and equipment, et cetera. And the next slide includes long-term liabilities. But looking at assets for starters here, big picture, current assets, so the cash and the receivables and the more short-term items is actually where you had the majority of your increase. You had about an increase of about 2.1 million compared to the prior year. And then capital assets, actually you had a decrease here of about 1.2 million just as a result of that on paper depreciation, the theoretical deterioration of your assets. They get depreciated over time. So I don't think you actually had a whole lot of capital asset activity for the year. But on a net basis, then you can see assets are up compared to the prior year. And liabilities, the only real change here, if just ignore the green bar there for a minute, pretend it's not there. Looking at it without the green bar, we have a decrease largely due just to your payments that you've made on debt during the year. The reason I say ignore the green bar is, as a reminder, that's the net pension liability. So that relates to TRA and PERA. Just the statewide plans, they calculate their overall statewide liabilities, and then they take a small piece and allocate it out to all the districts, all the schools throughout the state, and they have you put a portion of that liability on your books, and you couldn't pay it off even if you wanted to. So because of that, I like to throw an extra slide in here that shows a comparison between your assets and your liabilities with all that pension stuff excluded. So this is the same assets in the blue from 2 slides ago, the same liabilities from the last slide, but now excluding the pensions. And then the green is just the net between the two. So on a net basis, what's happening with your assets versus your liabilities. You can see that you've had some nice increases over the past couple of years. And then just another slide showing your debt balance over the past 5 years. Decreased about $900,000 from FY23 to FY24, just due to the payments that you made throughout the year. Okay, and I have one final slide that I threw in here as an extra sort of informational slide this year, just related to a new accounting standard that's going into effect for FY25. So we'll need to address this during next year's audit, but this relates to compensated absences. So compensated absences, essentially another way of saying that is it's any accrued leave that employees have. So it could be sick leave, it could be vacation, it could be PTO, any sort of leave that employees accumulate. In the past, you haven't had any sort of liability on the books for these accrued balances because you haven't needed to. In the past, it's been like, well, do they get paid out when an employee leaves? And if the answer is generally no, then you don't record a liability. Well, the biggest change under this new standard is that regardless of whether or not these balances get paid out when an employee leaves, we still need to record a liability for it at the end of the year. And the idea there is that, chances are it's going to be used in some form, whether by being paid out or by them just simply taking the time or, something along those lines. So long story short, we need to make sure that we're tracking and consolidating all the records for employee accumulated hours at the end of the year, and then calculating a liability. And I know this is probably going to be a little bit of an undertaking because of the different contract terms for different employee groups and the different types of leave that they get. But I wanted to put it on your radar. I know that there are some actuaries that, for example, the actuary you work with for your OPEB study, I know they've been reaching out and offering to assist with these calculations. So that might be an avenue to explore. But it will be something that's going to take a little bit of time to put the numbers together. So. Any questions?
Okay.
I think we got it covered.
So the more detailed documents, the financial statement and the report to the board, those were included in the agenda. So if anybody had deeper questions, but his summary comes from all of those documents. So just so that community members too know where that comes from, if they want to dig in, it's got everything in the tables as well. So. Go ahead, sorry.
I'll make a motion, we approve the 24 audit report as prepared by our accountants.
So Bruce makes a motion, Ron seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad the batteries didn't die on me. So
You'd been about halfway here. All right, thank
all
you.
right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, then we go to the 23-24 final fund balance after audit action.
Yep. So this is a very procedural item that you have historically done, is after the audit, you are historically approving the fund balance. And so I'll just kind of show you that that matches. I did move the chairs up. Did you notice? But I will make this bigger. And really what this is, so this is, this is updating all of the fund balances. So it's the beginning fund balance, and you'll notice the, oh, I don't want that to be quite so jerky. There we go. This has been updated as of 10/15. Oh, why that's, right at the top left of the screen, it does say updated 10/15. And these numbers have been updated to match what's in the audit. So just this would be a formal approval of the fund balance after audit.
Okay, any questions? We have a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Rachel seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it passes. World's best workforce.
All right, so the world's best workforce, and this is a lot of what Bruce and Gerald were talking about earlier that was gone over with the parent advisory or the district advisory group. And let me get this presented. And then, okay. So, and some of this information and data we've looked at as a group earlier throughout in October. And we've had some of this data over the course of years, but this is really the world's best workforce is a plan required by the Minnesota Department of Education. And we do this is the public meeting, and then there was a parent meeting that was the November 18th date. So making sure that we're not using jargon without a definition of what they are. There's a lot of definition in here. And so this screen really is just a reminder of all of the language that is utilized throughout this report. So again, the purpose of the world's best workforce is to have some consistency across districts at the state, throughout the state, that is supposed to kind of like guide as a strategic plan. Well, we have our own strategic plan that we, is like the 3-5 year plan. And a lot of what we're doing there is in alignment here as well. But one of the things that we've really made a concerted effort over the last couple of years is to make sure that many of our grants and the plans that we apply to the Minnesota Department of Ed for funding for align and are kind of focused in the same areas, okay? This year, during the 24 legislative session, the World's Best Workforce name was changed to Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness. And there is a 5th goal area that will take place in 24-25. We'll start reporting on. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but more will come on that. So what we're going to take a look at are these first 4 goal areas. And then as we learn more about how we're going to measure that 5th area, prepare students to be lifelong learners, we'll kind of address that. I would like to suggest that there's lots of ways that we all demonstrate that we're lifelong learners, but we'll see what the department comes back with a recommendation. So more to come on that. So the first goal, so one of the things that we have done, and this is going to be new for this year, is you're going to see that we are proposing a goal for the 24-25 school year. Okay. In the past, we've just spoken about what's been happening, and then we've talked about whether we met the goal or not. But now we're going to start talking about, okay, let's also be mindful of what are we working toward over the next year. Okay. So the first goal area is all children are ready for school. So some of the action steps and the things that we have been doing. And again, so the plan that you're being presented is looking back at the previous year. The green box on the bottom, the 24-25 goal, is moving forward. Okay, so looking back, what are the things, the action steps that we took? We expanded our preschool programs in 3s and 4s. So you remember approving additional sections there. We've streamlined some census data to communicate with potential incoming kindergarten students. We are trying to hold the screening dates on 2-hour late starts to have ease of staffing and more continuity so that we're not having one group of students in preschool consistently miss, like a morning or an afternoon. And we're also looking at something that we have started the conversation about, and more to come, is how to incorporate similar screening methods from preschool to kindergarten, okay? So in 23-24 school year, all students entering kindergarten will be screened. So what was the data? 64 out of 64 students were screened in 23-24. We only had one student that needed to be screened in the first 6 weeks of kindergarten, okay? In 24-25, we are going to again say that all students entering kindergarten will be screened, okay? All racial and economic achievement gaps between students are closed. So what are the action steps? So for us, our focal area has been on our free and reduced student population. We have historically had a gap in our student achievement between students with special needs and an IEP and students without. Due to the cell size of many of those indicators, it can be identifiable. So while we maintain the focus, we're not reporting that data publicly because it could be identifiable. So we come back to looking at our free and reduced population. And we know historically also that students, there's research that suggests that students that are coming from a household that qualifies for free and reduced price lunches have more achievement gaps. And so that's the data that we decided to look at. What we have in front of us is our MCA data, and the MCA data pulls the information right from what we submit to the state. And you'll see that the middle bar where it says results, you've got so non-FRP. So again, the reminder of the FRP means free and reduced program. So I'm going to pause for a second and say this used to be where we filled out the form that we use for compensatory funding. Okay, so that's the free and reduced form. That's the eligibility, okay, for this indicator, okay? And you'll see that the non-FRP reading proficiency was 52.5, and the free and reduced reading proficiency was 35.9, okay? And you'll see that the math gap, the non-free and reduced math proficiency was 53.2, and the free and reduced math proficiency was 33.8. Clearly, we still have room to grow, and we have work to do. And so you'll see that this goal was not met. At the district advisory, I gotta go back one. At the district advisory, we had conversation about utilizing our FastBridge data in addition to MCA. And so what you're gonna see in the goal box is, are some words that the proficiency gap between the non-free and reduced, non-FRP and FRP students at Paynesville area schools in reading as measured by the FastBridge fluency assessment will decrease at least 2%. So we're hoping to close that gap by at least 2%, okay? Now, the timing of that you'll notice is from spring of 2024 to spring of 2025. Why is that? Because it's the same timeline as our baseline data from MCAs, okay? So we're looking at the same time of year. And in math, you're gonna see the proficiency gap from the non-free and reduced students in math as measured by the FastBridge Math Automatically, which is a math assessment, will decrease by at least 2%. So a 19.3% gap to a 17.3% gap, okay? So this is an area we continue to work on, and it's something that we've got to stay focused on. Okay. All students graduate from high school. We've had a lot of conversation about all of our opportunities. We've spent some time looking at the SLEDS data on MDE. But you'll notice that last year we had 93.5% of our students graduate, so we did not meet our 95% target. One thing you have to remember is that when you have less than 100 kids graduating in a class, 1 and 2 kids are a lot of percentage points, okay? So we are proposing to keep that goal at 95% because that's easily within our reach, okay? All students are ready for career and college. So the correlation here is that our students' performance in 8th grade predicts how prepared they are to be ready for a college entrance or entering into the career force. So couple action steps that we've really talked through are really raising awareness of why MCA assessments matter and why we really want to try to have some active data, like active engagement to have good data. We continue to encourage students to participate in ACT and PSAT. The reason we've seen a stark decline in ACT is because colleges don't require it anymore. And so it's not necessarily beneficial unless you're maybe looking at scholarship. You know, that might be a criteria for a scholarship, but it may not be criteria for entrance anymore. So we've seen a marked decline in ACT participation. Some of the other things that we're continuing to do is to take a look at how many opportunities we have for our students to go into post-secondary enrollment options through the high school, how many of the college and the schools classes we continue to offer. So in all of that preparation, we kind of come back and take a look at our 8th graders. And so for the goal was Paynesville Area Schools 8th grade students increasing reading proficiency by 2% as measured by FastBridge A reading and MCA reading assessments. You'll see that we met our goal. The A reading for 23 was 63% and 24 was 65%. So that's good. And our MCA reading was in 2023 was 17.2% to 31.3%. Huge improvement. I would say a lot of that is conversation, dialogue, and awareness. Okay. And people are doing a good job. We're having good conversations about learning. So our goal is to continue to increase that reading proficiency by 2%. Using the FastBridge, we want to be up to 67%. Okay. So all of the plans that we have align to these goals and align to the work, okay? So when Ryan was talking about some of the audit and like the special education funding or the state funding, and then our federal funding, these plans are all part of that funding sources. The ADSIS, which is Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instructional Services, is a program that is sponsored by the state of Minnesota, and we have to have a plan. We had to apply to be part of it. And then we have to have targeted growth goals, okay? It aligns with the work that we've just been talking about, okay? Our title grant, in order to be eligible for title grants, it is based on the percentage of students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch. It comes from district-wide factors such as homelessness, the poverty rate that's based on the census data. So the school doesn't have any, we don't report anything, they pull it from just our census data. But this is one of the other reasons why we've talked so much about that free and reduced form, because if we miss families, it can impact our title funding, okay? And then we also have our achievement and integration plan. So the achievement and integration plan also generates revenue for our school district. And it's because we are part of a consortium, and or a collaborative. So Melrose, Long Prairie, Gray Eagle, Sauk Center, Belgrade, Brutenell, Rosa, and Paynesville, we all are part of this collaborative with the goal to, depending on what your targeted area is, for us, again, we're looking at reducing the gap between our free and reduced students and our non-free and reduced students, because unlike Melrose and Gray Eagle, we don't have a population of students that are English language learners or second language students, right? So our focus area is a little bit different. One of the other goals that's a big part of this program is about creating opportunities to increase cultural awareness, okay? So these two focal point areas of academic achievement and the cultural awareness are part of the achievement and integration plan, okay? You'll see the reason why Melrose and Long Prairie Gray Eagle have an asterisk. The reason we're eligible to be part of this is because of our proximity to those two, because we butt up to Melrose, okay? So if you're one of the neighbors, you have an opportunity to be part of an achievement and integration plan and generate some additional revenue. The other piece that kind of comes into this is just a reminder of the curriculum review. There is not a change from last year. Let me share this tab instead. There's not a change from this year, with the exception of, or from last year, with the exception of, we do need to continue to look at our ELA, our English Language Arts through the 6-12, to make sure that they have, if there's any additional needs that they have. I know Cassie has talked a lot with you at the board level about the curriculum implementation for the elementary. And so we just want to make sure that the secondary is also in alignment as we're evaluating science for this year. With that, I would just pause for any questions that you might have about World's Best Workforce.
Any
I'd
questions?
like to make a comment. I was on the World Best Workforce Committee for a number of years. It was a sleeper meeting. I should bring my sunglasses along. It's going to have to keep your eyes open because it was like we were filling in the blank. Since our superintendent got here, I remember the conversation we had at one of our committee meetings to try and make this, fill in the blank report, part of our whole system. What my impression is you now have combined Fast Bridge, our stuff we want to achieve on the MCA, along with a whole bunch of other things. And the end result of that is we have all the information to fill this in. I think it's fantastic. The meetings are interesting and you feel like you're moving forward. When you're filling in the blank, it's like, ugh. I mean, where are we supposed to go tomorrow? Now we are moving ahead, and I'm very proud of the administration staff and everybody's working on this because we are looking into the future, trying to make it better as we go. And this is part of it. But I'm telling you, they were boring meetings for us, I was concerned.
Well, if you look at the form, it's really not a super exciting form. I mean, let's be honest and let's be real. But this is so that's the data and that's the chart. And this is what we will submit to the Department of Ed, which is really our look back about how we've been doing. But I do think that if we're going to ask our students to take an assessment, and if we're going to expect our teachers to understand that and know that, then I think we have a responsibility to do something with it, and use it to drive decision-making and have discussion about it, right? So thank you for that feedback. And have goals. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I'll make a motion that we approve the 23-24 World's Best Workforce Report as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Cheryl, second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it passes. Great, thank you. Good report. Now we go to audio enhancement project approval, which we had a really good presentation at the work session. So we've had a lot of input already.
Yep. So there's two things that I've had two questions. One is a point of clarification. So we did not build in the cost to have the central office distribution to both. It's about $15,000. And with only having two buildings, it seemed like an excessive amount of money to put in to have the district office paid to both buildings when we can do that with our phone system. So we had an alternate source. So if the board feels strongly that that's something that you want to do, it is a possibility. And we all kind of went back after and went, wait a minute, is that in there? Is it not? And it's not, but we are capable of doing it, but it is costly. And it's,
But we're accomplishing.
we can still do
Same
it.
thing.
We can still do the same thing with our phone system, okay?
Yep.
And then the other thing is I did inquire about shipping. The shipping is considerable, but it comes from Ohio,
Salt Lake.
okay? It comes from Salt Lake into Minneapolis, and then it has to get programmed, and then it comes out. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not. We've had a couple of instances where we've been able to make some pretty substantial cost savings by going and picking things up. It just wasn't as feasible of an option. So I just wanted to share those two pieces with you as you look at making an approval.
I did a little mini tour in Belgrade School. Came away pretty impressed. Very impressed, so.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract of up to $460,000.
I second.
Joe seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it passes.
Okay.
Move on to policy review.
So there's one piece that came across from MSBA on Friday. And so I'm going to propose, and I gotta get the right number here because I made a note on it. And there's minor changes, but they have not been reviewed by the committee. So I'm gonna suggest that policy 721 come off for approval. And we'd put it on the next cycle, just because the policy committee has not had an opportunity to review the changes. And so I feel like let's be mindful of the fact that we know there's some changes, pull it off, let the policy committee review that, and then we can put it back on, okay? Beyond that, I'll just kind of walk through. Rick, is that what you'd like me to do?
Yes.
Just walk through? Okay. So taking a look at policy 103, which is the students, employees, parents, and other persons. There were minor edits. You'll notice that the policy committee just said, go ahead and make the changes. Public participation in school board. There are also minor edits and reference edits throughout the policy. This is the practice that our school board has in place. Okay, and when you look at our website, this is the information that's mirrored. So just want you to know that is the practice that you as a board follow is what's in that policy. Out-of-state travel, there is one removal on appropriate travel. I don't know that anyone from the board has ever requested an out-of-state conference, but it's there. Fund balance, I'm going to finish with. So let me go down to the uniform grant guidance policy. There's just spelled out some language.
That's one you're taking off, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Miranda, can you X that out for me? And then the public data request. So there's been a lot of school districts have had public data requests. So MSBA did review the policy, and there are some contact information of who people need to reach out to request public data. The process has been followed. We've had people request various things of data, and it comes into the office, and we just hold off. Or we hold off. I'm watching her type. And we don't just disregard. When the request comes in, we just follow through with the portions of the data that are requested and follow the policy if needed. The post-issuance debt compliance policy, you'll notice that there is not, there's not an MSBA recommendation, but our auditors do require us to have this policy. So we did have them take a look at that for us, okay? So I'm gonna come up to the fund balance policy. So the fund balance policy in our old policy, so I'm gonna pull this one up and just draw a little bit of attention. There was some verbiage within the policy that was contradictory because in one place it referenced unassigned, in other places it referenced a culmination of funds. And so we did have our auditor look at it, and they did not, the changes that are being proposed, they felt comfortable with because it was cleaner and it made more sense. I also had extensive conversation with them about the percentage, okay? So you will see in the audit report, we're at about 22 point something percent. I went back and looked and had conversation about the history of our fund balance percentage. And the committee, the policy committee talked through increasing that to 15%. In years past, it was at about 7%. So let me just explain what that percentage does. All that means is that when we hit, if our unassigned fund balance falls to 15%, then we start looking at measures of either reducing expenditures, we look at increasing revenue, increasing activity fees. You start looking at those mechanisms sooner than waiting until it falls to 12.5% or where it was prior at 7%. As Bruce talked about, and I know that in previous presentations with when we were going out for the operating referendum, kind of the history of our district has been that the fund balance grows when you approve a referendum. And then you kind of hit a pivotal point, and then you hit a decline because your revenue is not going to be matching your expenditures. So then you have to tap into your fund balance. And once you start tapping into your fund balance, historically, that is a steeper decline than the uphill climb to get to the top of the hill. That's been our experience, okay? So the board, the policy committee talked about increasing that to 15% with this round of policy review. So with that, I would stand for any other questions. Otherwise, this would sit in the district office for 20 days. And if there's questions, but there's no formal action that would be required on this tonight.
I think the 15% is a good idea. I can tell you when we first got on, Cheryl and I were on it, I think we were at 7%. We'd have given our eye teeth to have 7% because we were floating right along the bottom and we couldn't get there to save our souls. And I think having more of an advance of trying to take action is only better because those were some ugly years as far as I felt.
When I think about as future continues, expenditures are gonna get more expensive. You know, so I mean, that decline is a faster decline. We can't get away from that, so.
That makes sense. I was gonna say, when we decided on 12.5%, that was so we could keep the doors open for X number of weeks or months. And everything has gone up since then. So 15% doesn't even keep up with inflation. So I think it's a great idea, up it to at least 15.
So your plan there to carry that further, once that drops down, that's when you push for another referendum, correct? It's kind of the circle of life, so to speak.
Well, it would depend on where you are in the cycle. So the 2022 referendum was approved for 10 years. So let's say we get to year 5 and we're hitting
The expenditures
fallout,
are gone.
wow,
Yep, you're
okay.
falling up.
Then the board would have to make some decisions as to, do you go out for an increase on top of? Or do you, because you have to, and I'd have to look at the language of what you have to do, whether you revoke the first one so that you can have a higher one over the course of the next. So there's like multiple ways, but that is one of the discussion points, Ron, is do you go back to your taxpayers and ask for more revenue, right?
Let's not get ourselves, you're gonna have to.
And it's that, or you make budget reductions.
Let's just cut to the chase. We're gonna have to. That's just how it works.
That is how it works unless
See, the
funding.
You float up this curve, it drops off really fast, you're back at it.
The circle.
All this number is is that you have an idea in advance.
Yep.
Because right now, if we had the 7% and none of us were on the school board, and they decide they're gonna decide at 7%, they're gonna run far out of money by the time they got the vote planned
Correct.
to ask the public. And then you still have the issue if they decide or not. It's just a little more breathing room to stay afloat.
And there are districts that have, I mean, there is a wide range of policies that are approved. There are some that are sitting at like 50%, and there's some that are at like 2%. I mean, I can tell you, when I was looking at kind of the, where those are, I also asked our auditor, you know, does 15% seem reasonable? And they felt that was reasonable as well. So, and they've worked with our district for a number of years, so.
Okay, so this will not be brought until January then.
Oh, we don't have 20 days.
We don't have
Now
20 days, we only have
so yes,
14
it'll
days
be-
to the next
it'll be-
meeting, so.
It'll be the end of January.
Yep.
For the policy. Yep,
And
thank
that's,
you, good call.
and that's this policy, correct? Or is that all?
All policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that is to try to figure out what to do 721 with changes, of the board, knowing that Rick's on it. He'll be stepping off. I don't want to go through and try to have either a policy meeting just to take care of one policy that we had in the review cycle. Can we do it now? But I guess maybe it doesn't matter.
Because you can't get it.
Right, I guess it doesn't
The
matter.
first reading for that one will have to come when the
It'll be
second
okay.
reading of these
Yeah.
others comes.
Or, I mean, the only thing would be if you had a special meeting between now and the 10th of December.
Exactly right.
That one policy.
Right.
And then we could have that on the December 10th board meeting, then there'd be 20 days to the end of January for,
That's true.
Yeah,
I mean, you could just have a first read with the one in December and then,
the 10th is a board meeting.
Yeah, we can do that, so if we.
and it'd be one, but I'm not on that committee, so I'm not gonna tell you. Go ahead, meet.
No, yeah. No, I agree with you, Tom, because that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to get it done before.
Okay, so and there's not, it's not like huge sweeping movements, but I just didn't feel comfortable putting it in front of the board saying, okay, here, this came in on Friday. Nobody's looked at it, but here you go. So let's, I will reach out to the policy committee members and try to find I think this one probably could be virtual. If you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And that would save a little bit of time and effort. So, and then we'll have it on the December.
Thanksgiving Day?
Yeah, no.
7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I was thinking like 3:00 in the afternoon. All right.
Okay, that brings us to upcoming meetings. And we've got, the next one will be, of course, truth and taxation at 6 o'clock, and then the board meeting will follow. Truth and taxation usually doesn't take 10 minutes
Or less.
or less.
It's not very long.
So, and then you've got the district-wide staff development planning meeting and safe meeting, that's
So that's formerly
Yeah.
C.
C, that's, and then continuing education. So anything else?
Okay, I got a question here, because I apologize. Turned out I didn't check my emails on the 18th. There was a meeting that I was supposed to have come here for. December 11th, that's only a certain select few are on that committee, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So I don't have to go to that.
No,
December 13th,
No.
that's a different
yep,
group
no,
that's on the,
Which I won't be able to attend that meeting at all.
okay,
We're conflict there, so.
okay, I'll be there.
okay. Not to take your fire away, but December 16th is a special group too, right?
Yes.
I'm not special, I'm not on that.
Your special group just isn't meeting in the next.
Yeah.
next month.
I was saying the 16th is the questionable one. They weren't sure if they were gonna hold that one or not yet.
To be determined.
Okay. Well, if there's no other business, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh,
I introduced the motion to adjourn.
okay, second?
I say, you're all
Seconds, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.